Welcome to the end of the world, survivors. You're tuned into the last voice on the airwaves, Harper, or as I've come to call myself, DJ Clueless, broadcasting from a radio station that still hums with life. I'm no longer alone, but winter is hard and the undead still roam outside. This is where we fight back. I'll be your guide through the madness, sharing survival tips, locations of safe havens, and the occasional existential crisis. The world's gone dark, and the dead outnumber the living, but there are some of us ready to fight back and to rebuild some of what we've lost. The only real question is, what's next? Stay tuned to Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio. Stick around if you're still alive. Welcome to Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio, and that song was Cherry Bomb by the Runaways. And Cherry Bomb makes me think of my latest trip to Malcolm's. And I think I am finally, after all of this, ready to talk about the trip to Malcolm's. First of all, it wasn't just the trip to Malcolm's that was rough. It was what happened after. It was the siege. It was the unrelenting waves of zombies. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we stayed in radio contact with the station. It was slow going. The horses did not want to go fast. We didn't want to go fast. So we traveled slowly. We knew it would take a few days by, babying the horses and trying to find places that would be good stops. Malcolm gave us a list of places that we could find shelter for us and for that many horses, but there weren't that many, 22 is a lot, and 22 horses and 16 people. It's a lot of people to cram into a space. So we made pretty good time. I will say we gave away 2 of the horses along the way. We met up with this couple, and, in the apocalypse time, I don't know if you were a couple in the times before or if you just became a couple now, and it hardly matters. It just doesn't even matter. So, we met them at our first stop. They had actually stopped at one of the places Malcolm suggested in the hopes of finding some horses. So when we showed up, they thought their dreams were answered. And they were actually headed to the Pacific Northwest. They had family out there, and it was taking them forever to get anywhere. Because when you're on foot, it's harder. You can't outrun fast zombies. You can't. They have a stamina that you cannot match and won't, not to be bleak about it, but if you can outrun a fast zombie, you have probably been blessed with some little extra oomph in your step, because the fast zombies don't care if their ligaments are destroyed, if their muscles rip, if their frame is damaged. They don't even notice it. They don't run out of breath. They don't have those kinds of problems, but you as a human do. You have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to use the restroom. You have to do all of the things inhabiting a human body means you have to do, including breathing, which is hard to do when you have a fast zombie after you. And they'd had a few close calls. We tried to convince them to go to Malcolm's with us instead, telling them that the Pacific Northwest was a bad idea. But they knew that. And they knew that the zombies were, up in Oregon and Washington and along the coast of California before they moved inland, and nothing could be told to convince them otherwise, that they wanted to go find their family, so that's what they were doing. So, okay. All right. However, they did have ammo, and ammo is always good for a trade, and they had medicines. And not like these people had some pot medicine. No, like they had, oh, various illins like penicillin, ampicillin, amoxicillin. I don't know if ampicillin's even one. I'm just saying there were a lot of cillins. They had a lot of pain pills too. So we made an exchange. We made a good old-fashioned horse trade. Although we weren't trading horses, but we were trading 4 horses. So they left happy. We had 2 less horses to wrangle. And we figured Malcolm might be unhappy about it, but if these people do find their family and decide to bring their family back this way, they will remember the kindness done to them by strangers and hopefully show up at Malcolm's willing to be part of the community or the station or any of the other settlements that we have moving around here. I considered it a good trade. There was debate. There was debate about it. Horses are kind of a costly thing right now, even though they seem to be falling into our lap pretty easily. And so I was willing just to hand over 2 horses, but we radioed Malcolm because fundamentally they're his horses now. You know, we offered, he accepted, they're his horses, we're just transporting them to him. So it seemed like a dick move to go, no, never mind, Malcolm, not 22, just 20, huh? We're giving them away to everybody we see on the way there. But Malcolm said that if some decent trade could be managed, that he would be happy with that. And medications are always a decent trade, you know. Malcolm has a few people who have been working at growing penicillin. I have no idea how any of that works, except I'm pretty certain it's a fungus. Or bacteria is what it kills. Is it a fungus? I don't know what penicillin is, guys. So what I'm saying is there are people who do, and they are making more of it. But that is untried, and medications that, you know, most of them haven't expired yet, are still much better in a pinch. So we went ahead with the trade with the medications, and it worked out rather well. And I don't know. I am pretty happy with making these connections on the fly. I am pretty happy with meeting new people. They had been basically in a shelter for the past 6 months and finally just got too stir crazy. The shelter, they made sure they had a radio down there. I assume it was underground because they keep talking like down there, under there, that sort of thing. Wouldn't tell us where the shelter was, but I didn't ask. It's kind of, I don't know, in my mind, it's a little rude to go, hey, where's your secret safety spot and can we raid it? You know, that just seems like the not cool thing to do. Also, if they come back this way, they may want that spot. You know, if they wanted to share it, they would make that apparent. So, we chatted a little bit, but mostly what they know has come from the radio and secondhand sources. So we were able to give them the lowdown on, you know, if you see more than 5 zombies in one spot, you're going to freeze. And there's very little any of us seem to be able to do about it. The Z Terror, the Z Fear, the Z Terror have many different flavors, but the more of them there are, the worse it gets. So, you know, we warned them about that. We warned them about ankle biters being the most common, and we see a lot of butts with bites on them when we do our bite checks. And the majority of the bites we see are butt bites, at least right now. So, be careful of all of that. So we did the best we could by them. They had pretty decent supplies as far as food goes, a lot of dehydrated products, a lot of MREs, that kind of thing. So yeah, they took a couple of the horses and they headed on their merry way. And the rest of the trip was uneventful. You know, I didn't talk much about it with the last trip, but you know, you see zombies everywhere. You know, maybe 1 or 2 here, 1 or 2 there. You know, the hordes are something to be avoided, which we all try to keep in contact with each other if there are any sightings of hordes. But the last horde to have been heard from was the one that came through after the Pikers. You know, once Captain Piker left, since he didn't want me sharing his name, he's just Captain Piker now. Not to be confused with Captain Pike. Anyway, so before we go down a Star Trek rabbit hole, let's pull up. And after he left, we left, and we stayed in radio contact with the station because most of us who left did not want to. We were worried about the oncoming horde. We were worried about how it would be handled. We were worried about all of that, and if you're there, you can do something about it. You can be on the roof taking out zombies. You can be helping in various ways. And I was very worried about the fence line. We only had chain link fences for our fence line, and so I was very worried about the structural integrity of that, or lack thereof. Because, you have 10, 20 zombies, it's not that big of a deal. We can pike them and move on through the chain link fence. We can snipe them from on top of the roof. It's not a big deal. We can take them out so they're not putting pressure on the fence. But you talk in thousands, that's a whole different deal. Thousands will trample right through that. Thousands will just destroy all of that. However, Captain Piker seemed to be right. They had a few hundred zombies that moved through the area. They kept inside. The zombies basically bounced off the fencing, and since there wasn't anybody inside the fencing to get to, they sort of just wandered around. If they hadn't taken the Piker's advice, if they had stayed outside and doing things, it probably would have been a lot worse. As it was, there was only 2 spots of fencing that were damaged, so they were able to fix that within the day. However, Priya is very, very convinced now that what we need are wooden privacy fences as an outer perimeter and maybe a large wall. She's thinking along the scale of, about a mile perimeter basically around the area as a very big wall. However, much like Malcolm is finding, getting supplies like that, pretty hard to do. It's heavy, those kinds of materials. We are not lucky enough to have a tech wizard like Captain Piker has, so we have to work with horses and humans and wagons and things like that. So building a wall is going to take a lot of extra time and effort. Instead, they're basically building kind of spiky barricades in various places so that any zombies who try to run up will get impaled in one way or another, and then pikers can come along later and take care of them. So that is part of what they're working on while we are gone, or while we were gone. By the time we got back, they got all of that finished up. But I'm trying to tell you the story as it happened instead of jumping around. Because as we got closer and closer to Malcolm's, there were no zombies. And I don't mean like we only saw a few stragglers here or there, or there were no zombies. We saw nothing. It was wild. It was wild. It was just quiet. And, on horseback, you can trot past zombies pretty quick. Unless they are newly born, they're not going to give you much trouble. Now, we still have people who are learning bow and arrow. We have people who are learning crossbows because they're quieter and materials are easier to get. Like, it's easier to whittle a tree than it is to make a bullet. So, or at least that's what the arrow people tell me. And I just listen, because again, I don't really know. I'm kind of clueless, guys. So anyway, we still take them out as we drive by. Well, as we ride by. I say drive. But as we ride by, we still take out the zombies that we see, because if they're on the roadway, they are a potential danger to anybody else traveling. And a live zombie is nobody's friend. A dead zombie is nobody's enemy. So we go with dead over live. Well, I guess I should say animated versus unanimated. So anyway, we didn't have to kill anybody the last 2 hours towards Malcolm's. There was nobody. There were no zombies. There was nothing that was even remotely in the way of our progress forward. So So yeah, we kept on trucking. We all commented on it being a little weird, and it creeped all of us out. Um, you you get used to seeing things like zombies everywhere. When you don't see them, it is unnerving because what are they doing? Where are they? What's happened to them? What's going on? And much like most things in the zombie apocalypse, I have endless questions and not enough answers. So, yeah, that's that's how that was. Leading up to Malcolm's, we actually arrived with a big influx of people. And we arrived and they took the horses, and the horses, you can tell if they've been bit anywhere. And with horses, you can have a zombie bite and they just sort of shake it off. It's like it doesn't affect them. You know, um, they don't die, they don't become zombies. It's more like you got to keep it from being infected, but that's by other things, not the zombie virus. So even if the horses were bit, it wouldn't be anything more than we got to treat this abrasion. We got to treat this wound. It wouldn't be, oh my God, they're going to turn into a zombie horse, which is good because life is already kind of ridiculous. I don't think I could handle zombie horses. I think that would be too ridiculous and my brain would just break, maybe more than it already has. So, anyway, but we were in a big line. And as you know, anytime you go to a settlement, you have to go through customs. And customs in this case is a strip search because, again, the majority of bites that we are seeing are on people's tushies. And so a strip search is the only way to be sure. Now, Malcolm did suggest that I try my truth power on the entire group and see if we had anybody step out as, bitten. But I told Malcolm that I actually kind of wanted these people to like me. And most of the people he works with don't like me anymore because he had me use my powers on them as guinea pigs. So no, I wasn't going to do that just as an experiment. If he finds a bitten and wants me to see if that works on them, at some point I can. Or if there is a future group that I'm not going to, be with for the next day or two. Because we all decided that since we were bringing Malcolm horses, we were going to take Malcolm up on his hospitality for a few days. And by that we mean take hot showers. We have beds, we have hot meals, but the hot shower thing really, Malcolm's ahead of us there. Our showers are tepid at best, and we work very hard to get them that way. So we decided to stay for a few days for hot showers, but the line was long for customs. And you know, uh, while we were in line, I was talking to one of the gentlemen, and he was talking about all of the zombies he killed. And not in like a bragging way, because we were talking about how few zombies we saw the last couple of hours on our journey. And, we were telling Malcolm that, and this man was very much like, yeah, yeah, I haven't seen any either, which is weird because I've traveled nonstop and there's zombie hordes everywhere. And we were like, really? We haven't seen a zombie horde in a while. It's been a chunk of time since one's happened. He's like, really? Because they happen to me constantly. And, he talked about he actually came from the Pacific Northwest. He came out of Seattle. And he's another one where he didn't really want me sharing his name. So I don't have a name for him. I think we will just call him Jim. We'll go with Jim. Jim is this man who came out of Seattle, and he was standing in line talking to us, and he was talking about how getting out of Seattle was basically a war against the zombies. And he was with people who were very well armed and good shots. And it took pretty much everything they had to get out of Seattle alive. And, even then they had to skirt the US patrols. We have armed forces making sure that the quarantine cities stay quarantined. But by the time they broke out of Seattle, They said that they didn't know if it was desertion, if the zombies had killed so many soldiers, but like the checkpoints that they thought would get them were empty, and the places where they snuck out, there wasn't anybody. So, I thought he was going to say, and then we had to go to war with them, but no, they were just not there anymore. And I think having experienced what I experienced at Malcolm's, that there's a darker reason. I think that zombie fear turns to zombie terror when there are zombies around constantly. And I think that fear makes people go a little crazy. So if you are guarding a city where there's hundreds of thousands of zombies, if not more, um, it starts to eat at you. It starts to affect you. And so I don't think desertion is out of the question. I don't think suicide's out of the question. I think that being on the borderland of a huge zombie horde like that does a lot of damage because the Z fear is unescapable and real, and you can't even talk yourself out of it. I have talked myself down from panic. I have talked myself down from anxiety attacks. I've been able to calm myself down, but the Z fear, there is no calming down from it. There is no talking yourself out of it. There's just white knuckling it. And so I kind of think that he, you know, Jim the Piker from Seattle was able to escape because I think a lot of service members were driven crazy by the fear, and it caused them to flee. It caused them to do things they wouldn't normally do in a sane and rational world, or even in a non-sane, war-torn kind of world. They probably would have stuck their posts. But when it feels like the zombies are inside your brain telling you it's hopeless and time to run, maybe they listened. Maybe, especially in the early days, because we didn't know crap about what was going on. We thought it was viral. I mean, there are a lot of people who still think it's viral. I think people have been trying to develop vaccines for a long time, and probably most of those people are dead now. Haven't heard anything out of the CDC in a long while. And so even what we heard there towards the end was so propagandized, we had no idea if the zombie stories the CDC was telling there at the end were accurate or not, because they were trying to keep mass panic in check. But, you say zombies, you see zombies, mass panic's going to happen. And, you know, uh, Jim from Seattle had a lot of panic stories, and a lot of death in Seattle happened simply because the Z terror broke people. And some of them committed suicide, some of them walked into zombies guns blazing, which in my opinion is probably another form of suicide. But it broke people. We used to think that people in the cities didn't survive because the zombies just were so pervasive, but now we're thinking that there are probably a lot of people who were in cities that were surviving, or are in cities and are still surviving. And if that's you, congratulations and kudos. You are a cut above most of the other people's willpower because you are still fighting the Z terror. Just know that it is real, and in my mind, it is external. It is an external force trying to press down upon you. I think that the fears that these zombies inspire, I think it's part of the overall malevolence of them. They aren't mindless eating machines. They don't eat anything but us, anything but humans. They have no interest in. I can kind of understand hunger that cannot be assuaged, but just destruction for destruction's purpose, I don't get. I do not understand, and I never will. And that's the zombie life. But talking to Jim with Malcolm, was pretty educational because I didn't think anybody in cities survived. I didn't think anybody in cities could make it out. The pikers that we talked to when we got all of the horses, they were military with military weapons and military training and military supplies of ammo. So, it's a little bit of a different thing than I'm pretty sure Jim said he used to be an accountant. But Jim has made it his life's mission to kill as many zombies as possible. And he estimates that he is in, somewhere around the 20,000 mark. And I asked him, so have you counted them all? And he's like, no, but I've counted the large batches. So much like the other pikers, he would set up traps, and with his traps, they weren't explosives. They were traps to pen zombies in somewhere where he can get from a rooftop and eliminate them rather easily. So he did that over and over and over again. And, he would count the shots because he was paying attention to ammo. So that's how he knows that it's such a high number. But according to him, zombies are everywhere, and he feels like the only way to survive is to keep moving. He is stopping at the plant for a night because somebody on their radio show keeps talking about hot showers. I don't know who that could be. Certainly not me. I would never tell you to go to the plant and have a hot shower, even though they're really nice and the water supply is endless. Because that might not be taken well, right? Anyway. So he was there for a few nights to grab a hot shower, to share some intel, and to get back on the road again. And so he and I decided we would meet up later and have dinner and talk about our various adventures. And that first night, everything went really well. And I'm going to end it here, so you're not on a cliffhanger of wondering what's going to happen next. Although in the future, we may have some more cliffhangery kind of episodes because the time at Malcolm's was rough and it lasted a while. It lasted a while. So I don't think I can fit it all into just one or two episodes. So that gets us there. And you guys have met Jim from Seattle, who is what I'm also going to call a piker. To get piker status, according to Malcolm, and I kind of agree, you need to kill several thousand zombies, basically. Otherwise, you're just surviving in the apocalypse. And speaking of surviving, if you are in a city, don't listen to the fear. Survive no matter what. Try and get some communication out, even if it's a smoke signal. Try and let us know that you're still alive, and stay alive. If you survive, someone will find you. There are people who are starting to explore cities and explore ways of extracting people from cities. So stay alive. Survive, survive, survive. This is DJ Clueless. Until next week. This is Harper signing off for now. Remember, the world is still turning, even if it feels like we're standing still. Survive, adapt, endure. As the dust settles, we are rising again. We are rebuilding from the ashes. Until then, keep moving, keep fighting, and whatever you do, survive.